And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war. This is our World War II. And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? And like.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. It is Monday, February the 16th, 2026. I'm Austin Peterson. And if you are up this early with your coffee, you're already ahead of the game this morning, so feel good about yourself. Happy birthday, Frickety Fred Siegel. It's a wonderful week for birthdays. Let's kick this off with some big energy, some facts, and the dry, sardonic humor that we all need to start the week. First, it's 7:30 this morning, 7 a.m., we're going to dive into the pure absurdity of elite moral lectures masquerading as compassion. Oakland's Burdell, named the #1 restaurant in the Bay Area, adds a flat 20% service charge to every check with a note explaining tipping has an ugly past rooted in underpaid labor. Diners erupted, calling it a 20% racism fee. New York Post ran with a headline about combating the country's racist past. 1-star reviews flooded Yelp. The owner, Jeff Davis, got threats and racist voicemails. He says the policy has been there since the pop-up days to ensure living wages. Well, turning your bill into a history seminar on America's sins while inflation bites everyone, well, that's also not how you keep customers coming back, regardless of the history, and we will get to that. Then we're going to pivot to Washington. Health Secretary RFK Jr. is driving snap changes. 5 states, Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Utah, West Virginia, already banned soda candy and other junk from food stamps as of January. More states like Idaho joining this month. Politico dropped an interactive quiz that is comedy gold. So is Gatorade junk? Well, it depends on the state. So granola bars with high sugar, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Retailers and shoppers are scrambling with no uniform list of what constitutes junk food. So it's kind of nanny state meets taking away subsidies / it's a chaos. Elites wonder whether this they can't agree or disagree over what constitutes junk food. So we're going to talk about incentives, the chaos, and of course why personal choice and responsibility beat mandates every time. Pedialyte? Great question. At 7:30 this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered a strong speech at the Munich Security Conference on February 14th. He said that Europe and the United States, quote, belong together. He says that we will always be a child of Europe, but that we do not want to preside over European decline.
We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective.
Now, we will always be a child of Europe, but we have no interest in being polite caretakers of the West's managed decline. Great speech. We're going to talk about that in a full segment, full breakdown today. Mass migration, it's an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of Western civilization itself. This was Marco Rubio's message. Deindustrialization was a conscious policy choice. He got a standing ovation from half the room, but of course, we are not just blind cheerleaders here. We're going to do an examination of Secretary Rubio here. He has a record of advancing a cause that he calls common good capitalism, which critiques shareholder primacy and advocating industrial policy. So we will ask this morning, has working for President Trump changed Rubio, Or is this just a smart survival adaptation? So we'll cover the timeline, the 2023 book that he wrote, Decades of Decadence, the 2019 speech, and why libertarians should stay skeptical even when the words hit right. Then, this morning at 8 a.m. Central, John Ziegler joins us to break down why he has fallen out of love with Thomas Massie over the Epstein files. Massie and Ro Khanna reviewed unredacted docs, spotted 6 redacted names that they called likely incriminated. Khanna read some on the House floor, but 4 had 0 ties to Epstein, and 1 was a mechanic who's apparently had his life destroyed this last weekend. Photo lineups, unrelated stuff. Ziegler calls it a dark fairy tale and drama queen moves. We'll get his candid take on transparency versus due process. And our closer today will connect the dots with history, McCarthy-era name drops, Duke Lacrosse Rush, Central Park 5, proving why due process beats mob justice, even against the powerful. You walk away smarter on incentives today, rule of law, and why principles trump personalities. So if you're a 1776 supporter of the For Liberty Network, thank you for all helping us to build this thing. The For Liberty Network is growing like crazy with a brand new show launching March the 3rd. We call it Cafecito Libre, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you Mylene Salabaria with her own show on the For Liberty Network, which has just been growing by leaps and bounds since we launched it about a year and a half ago. The For Liberty Network, all of the information about the network, if you'd like to read more, go to my show's website, wakeupAmericaShow.com. That's where everybody signed up to be 1776 Peterson's Patriot supporters. So head on over to forlibertyshop.com if you'd like to shop this morning. But wakeupAmericaShow.com, we've got a new For Liberty Network page pulled up there for you. So if you guys want to see everything that we have for the network, head on over to the wakeupAmericaShow.com. And when you go there, just click the For Liberty Network. It will pull it up with all of the information and details about where we are and where we're headed. Yes. Got that put together this weekend because I'm always working, always trying to make life better for our friends. And thank you for helping me to build this thing. Will Run Riot and YO Wildman and everybody who's been a supporter. We appreciate you. Don't forget, we also have bonus content for you to unlock today. So if you'd like to support the For Liberty Network and kick in a few dollars, Rumble rants count as tips. So, and we're doing our taxes right now, and it's been kind of, taxy. It's been taxing. But thankfully, Trump's No Tax on Tips Act does apply to people like moi. I voted for this. So drop a Rumble rant or go to forlibertyshop.com this morning, buy a box of Founding Flavors coffee. And if you like the coffee, subscribe for a monthly distribution. And it's not a ration. You got to pay for it and you get all you want. Or you can just hit the Discord at forlibertynetwork.com. All right, it's time. So we've got a sharp show today. Stick around. Wake up, America. Let's roll. Okay, guys. This morning we're talking about Burdell, which was a rabbit hole that I did not expect to go down over the weekend. Thank you, Quest Fanning. So it's one of the supposed best restaurants in the Bay Area, at least according to the elites that live there. But now they are being accused of going full woke. So they're automatically slapping a 20% service charge on every single check. So no choice, no voluntary exchange, right? Mandatory. You're going to pay it if you want to have it. So the receipt comes with a history lesson that nobody asked for, but we're going to get it. So it says tipping has an ugly past rooted in the post-Civil War exploitation of freed black workers. The owner says that it guarantees stable wage and health benefits, but customers are kind of upset. They're not buying the guilt trip. So they've been flooding Yelp with 1-star reviews and calling it a 20% racism fee. People are absolutely furious. I mean, imagine how it would feel going out for a nice meal and then getting handed a lecture on systemic oppression with your dessert bill. So Milton Friedman says there's no such thing as a free lunch, and at Burdell, the lunch comes with the side of moral superiority and a flat fee. That's wake up, America. The market is screaming back. He's free to bring up these things at dinner time. and customers are free to complain about it. Now, here's the thing. So Burdell is just kind of the tip of the iceberg in a nation that's completely fed up with tip creep. So we're seeing suggested gratuities hitting 25 to 30% at coffee shops where they just hand you a muffin. So the latest surveys are in, and they're a staggering 77% of Americans say tipping has gotten ridiculous. 65% are totally fed up with the digital guilt screens. The history is real. After the Civil War, restaurants often paid zero wages to black workers, forcing them to live entirely on tips from white patrons. And the federal tip minimum wage has indeed been frozen at $2.13 per hour since 1991. So that's over 30 years without a change. Of course, I think the solution is not mandatory fees and lectures. The solution is the market. People are pushing back because the voluntary nature of this transaction, it feels like more of a social coercion. So you go from rewarding good service to sort of subsidizing labor costs under the threat of being called a bigot is how people feel about it, right? And Americans really are not fans of this kind of moral lecturing. Now, in San Francisco, it's the kind of thing that you might expect. Locals in San Francisco, for example, do feel like this is the kind of thing that they would normally do and pay for because, well, it is San Francisco after all.
Named best restaurant in America last year is going viral right now for its controversial tipping policy. The restaurant's called Burdell, and there's been even more headlines that are continuing to stoke the fire. It all started with a viral Reddit post that is in the r/n tipping subreddit. The post has since been removed, but it was made by a customer who dined at Burdell, and it has everything to do with this 20% service charge. Now, if you live in the Bay Area and you are the target audience of a restaurant like this, a 20% service charge is no big deal and not something that we would ever ask a question about, really. But the comment—
True. They in San Francisco would accept something like that because they're one of the wealthiest metropolitan areas. Some of the richest people in the world would be dining at a place like that, where if you put a 20% race, you could call it a racism fee. If the restaurant wanted to call it a racism fee, they could make it 100% of the bill, and these idiots would pay it.
that are still up on the subreddit have a lot to say about how the restaurant should just raise their prices anyway, or this is deceptive, or they would ask for it to be removed. But again, the restaurant doesn't accept tips, and the existence of the service charge is clearly stated on the menu. The owner of Burdell posted a pretty long Instagram post to address a lot of the controversy and the feedback they've been getting. He points out that they pay their employees very well above minimum wage, and that tipping in the US started at the end of slavery as a way to pay sub-livable wages to newly freed slaves. So—
Okay, not true. That's 50%, 50-50. So tipping did not start with slavery. Tipping was brought to the United States from Europe, and actually tipping was resoundingly rejected initially amongst Americans because they saw it as undemocratic. They saw it as something of the European elite because it actually didn't start with tipping slaves in the United States. It began with tipping servants in Europe, and Europeans would bring that practice to the United States, along with our fated slavery.
And why they don't accept tips and why they charge a 20% service charge instead. Burdell has actually never accepted tips, and a 20% service charge is pretty on par with what a lot of restaurants charge around here, if not a little less than some others. This restaurant has been on my list to try for so long, it is not coming off that list, and I hope I get to go soon. A restaurant in Oakland that was named
Oakland Eatery, best restaurant in America. All right. Well, so the truth, as usual, something that you have to suss out because you'll never get it from the legacy media or from the alternative unless you're watching the Wake Up America show. And the stories that you're watching, by the way, today, and the guests that you'll see, you will see later on other shows, or you will see them next week on the legacy media. When you watch the Wake Up America show, just note that many of these stories are breaking news stories that you're going to see and hear a nice full breakdown before any of the other shows are going to touch it. So some shows are going to do the stories that I'm going to do today, and they're going to get millions of views tomorrow, and that's fine, right? They've built their audience. They've earned it, right? However, I think it's important to note that Austin Peterson's Wake Up America show is the student who says it first. So if you like to hear things if you like to hear Austin's stories before they get repeated on other shows, Always make sure that you're watching the Wake Up America show. Click the follow button so you get a notification whenever we go live, which is 5 days a week, so that you can hang out with Relaxium McGroin, Will Run Riot, M&M's, or Jimmy Joe Patty. Always ahead of the curve. That's right, birthday boy. Wake Up America. Shift your eyes from the Oakland elites to the grocery aisles because Health Secretary RFK Jr. is making moves. Let's talk about the Make America Healthy Again agenda. No, it's not sniffing cocaine off toilet seats. Starting January 2026, the subsidy for poison is ending. Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Utah, and West Virginia have officially banned soda, candy, and junk food from the SNAP program. Yes. Idaho, Oklahoma, and Louisiana are right behind them. So this is a massive win for what I would say, I would call common sense libertarian nationalism. Why are taxpayers subsidizing the obesity and chronic disease epidemic? We're literally paying to make our fellow citizens sick. RFK Jr. is standing up and saying no more. The government should not be in the business of funding type 2 diabetes with your hard-earned money. Stephanie and I were having a conversation this weekend because we're working hard to get more protein into my diet, just because I'm on a diet. I don't know if you guys have noticed from my jawline, but I've lost about 10, 12 pounds. Getting rid of the moobs. And a lot of that involves just getting protein, good, healthy protein in your diet. And we were talking about how expensive it is to get like good, healthy protein in your diet, to buy all of the meat that you need to sort of crowd out the carbs and the sugars and all the things that you're trying to cut down on. And it's expensive. It is expensive. But I said you either pay for it up front or you pay for it later. You either pay for the steak and the good healthy proteins up front, or you pay for it in the health insurance bill later. You know what I'm saying? Now, we shouldn't be funding diabetes with our tax dollars. It is about personal responsibility, and it's about our national vitality. We do want a strong, healthy, independent populace. We don't want a permanent underclass addicted to government-funded high-fructose corn syrup. Wake up, America. We're stopping the bleeding and taking the sugar off the taxpayer tab. It's about time somebody had the guts to protect the American physique from bureaucratic neglect. So we give 2 thumbs up. Cecilia says, congrats, AP. Protein is so expensive, but it's definitely the best way to lose weight and be healthier. It is. It helps you be full. My new routine is I have a bowl of oatmeal and 2 hard-boiled eggs, cup of espresso, some water to start the morning. Then around 9 a.m., some cottage cheese and fruit. Then for lunch, I either have like a salad with like fish or chicken. And then for dinner, it's like steak and a potato. And it's a great routine. That's the way to go. That's a good, healthy day. And you'll lose weight. Feels good too. So the government, of course, is discovering that defining junk food is actually harder than running the post office. Since there's no uniform federal definition, every state has been making up their own sort of ridiculous rules. So Politico released an interactive quiz that was pretty funny. Gatorade is banned in one state, but totally fine in the next. Some high sugar granola bars are allowed, while healthier organic options are blocked because they don't fit a specific code. Iowa literally refused to publish a full list because they said it was too tedious. Can you believe that? They want to enforce a law that they're too lazy to even write down. So this is, of course, what happens when you try to micromanage the baskets of millions of people from a state capital. The intent is great. The Maha energy and direction is right, but the inconsistency is creating a mess at the cash register. It's a classic case of government ambition hitting the wall of reality. You can't administer food stamp programs efficiently or effectively because government is not efficient or effective. It's a joke to assume that it can be efficient or effective. So, of course, even a good idea can be smothered by a bureaucrat and a clipboard. So let's look at the second order effects because the market always finds a way. When you ban soda in one state, but not the other, you're not just promoting health, you're creating a black market for Mountain Dew. So we're seeing resentment growing in these communities as people face confusion at the checkout line. So imagine the scene: a single mom in West Virginia trying to buy a granola bar, only be told it's banned by a list that nobody can see, while the same bar is legal across the border. So this is the friction of the state. It is the inevitable result of central planning. Even for a good cause, we cheer the end of subsidy, but we have to laugh at the absurdity of the delivery here. The lesson here is simple. You cannot replace individual choice without creating a massive administrative headache. The Burdell restaurant wants to lecture you into paying their labor costs, and the state wants you to sort your grocery bag into categories even they cannot agree on. Both stories, of course, about the question of top-down diktats. Wake up, America. The road to hell is paved with good intentions and inconsistent grocery lists. Wake up, America. At the end of the day, the founders did not give us liberty so that we could be lectured in Oakland or have our diets managed by a bureaucrat in Iowa. They gave us liberty so we could take responsibility for our own lives. Whether it's deciding how much we want to tip for good service or deciding what to put in our own bodies, we stand for voluntary exchange and personal accountability. I personally support RFK Jr. ending the corporate welfare for Big Soda, but we should mock the ineptitude of the state in defining a candy bar. We reject the guilt-tripping elites who want to tax your dinner to suit their own consciences. Stop the subsidies, stop these stupid racism fees, and start treating Americans like adults again. The market is the greatest tool for justice ever created, not a service charge with a side of historical revisionism. We need moral clarity, not bureaucratic fog. It's time to bring back the spirit of independence in every aisle and at every table. Stay tuned, because we're going to talk today about Marco Rubio's incredible speech. And we're going to ask whether or not he is given an absolute heel turn under Donald Trump. But spoiler alert, Milo Yiannopoulos called me a retard this weekend for asking if Marco Rubio has changed, because apparently asking questions these days will get you labeled a retard. And I invited him on my show to call me a retard to my face, damn it, but he decided not to until I become an unrepentant, God-bothering fascist, I guess. I don't know. We had a little exchange. But speaking of patriotic fervor, join us in Boston, May 1st and 2nd. Stephanie, Justin, and myself in Boston, Massachusetts, May 1st and 2nd. We got our hotel yesterday. Stephanie and I got it booked. May 1st and 2nd, we will be in Boston, Massachusetts, and we are going to do a Liberty tour. It's our second annual Liberty tour in Boston, May 1st and 2nd. You don't want to miss it. If you're looking for info or details about it, all you got to do is head over to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. When you go to forlibertyshop.com, you can see all of our wonderful products, like our Kiss Me, I'm a Libertarian shirt. That's why Milo doesn't like me. Peterson's Patriots Boston tour. Click on that image of colonial America, me, Stephanie, Hazel, and Justin. Don't you want to hang out with the Petersons? Be a Peterson's Patriot. Join us in Boston. Go to forlibertyshop.com. You're going to get to meet all of our friends like Andy Opperman, Quest Fanning, Susan Austin, Jake Gata. We're going to have an absolute blast. If you've already got your tickets, don't forget your premium merch, official tour merch available at forlibertyshop.com. Lots of important terms and conditions. Make sure you read it fully. Join us May 1st and 2nd for an epic, historical 250th anniversary trip to Boston, Massachusetts. Visit forlibertyshop.com, scroll down that front page, and get your tickets today. So, wake up, America. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stepped out on the stage in Munich and delivered a speech that would have made the globalist elite spit out their champagne. He looked those European leaders in the eye and said that the United States and Europe belong together. We will always be a child of Europe, but we have no interest in being the polite caretaker of the West's managed decline.
But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. But the euphoria of this...
So he calls mass migration an urgent threat to the very fabric of our societies and the fabric of Western civilization itself. So he blasted the deindustrialization policies that have left both continents weaker, while China and Russia laughed all the way to the bank. And half the room after that speech gave him a standing ovation. And this was not the Marco Rubio that we saw in 2016 calling Donald Trump a con artist. This was a man who was speaking with the confidence of someone who has seen the machine from the inside and decided to fight for the West instead of managing slow decline. But here's the question that keeps libertarians and nationalists like me up at night. Has working for President Trump actually changed the man? Or is this the ultimate adaptability play from a shrewd politician who knows how to survive and thrive in the new America First era? So we're going to spend the next half hour walking through the facts, the quotes, the timeline, and the second order effects so you can decide for yourself, because the audience of this show, Wake Up America, is too smart for cheerleading and too skeptical for blind trust. So let's get to the truth.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right, even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. Favorite part.
Oh, no, not an appeal to Western culture. No. Anything but that. Anything but an appeal to Western culture. Stop. No.
Was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that. I think it's also important to note how thin that
cowboys originated in Mexico during the 1500s, stemming from Spanish settlers who introduced cattle ranching and horsing to the Americas.
Foundation is. Culture is changing.
Where does she think that the Mexicans came from? Has Marco Rubio, is he a tiger who has changed his stripes? He says...
For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Good stuff. So has Marco Rubio shifted? Has he actually changed? Now let's go back to the book that signaled this shift. In June of 2023, Marco Rubio released Decades of Decadence, which was a pretty brutal takedown of the post-Cold War elite consensus that attacked the 4 pillars of American strength: good local jobs, stable families, geographical communities, and a sovereign nation that serves as a beacon of freedom and prosperity. So Rubio argues the end of history delusion led to unfettered trade deals, global institutions, and a cultural assault that left working Americans behind, while the coastal elites got richer and more decadent. So this was not the speech of a Chamber of Commerce Republican. So this was a populist diagnosis that sounded a lot like what President Trump had been saying for years. And it showed that Rubio was paying attention to the same voters who elected Trump twice. Wake up, America. This book is evidence that something had already changed in Rubio long before he became Secretary of State. He was rejecting the neocon forever wars and the Davos globalism that had dominated the Republican Party to that point. But notice what he did not reject: the idea that government should play a bigger role in shaping economic outcomes. So that brings us to the part that still makes free market conservatives and libertarian nationalists like myself raise an eyebrow, because adaptation is one thing, but principles are another. And we shouldn't ignore the record just because the rhetoric in Munich sounded right. We're going to talk a little bit about Marco Rubio. After all, he is one of the leading contenders for president in the Republican Party. So, common good capitalism, red flags. So in November of 2019 at the Catholic University of America, then Senator Rubio delivered the speech that still haunts me to this day, and some quotes appear in commercials of this show. He said, "Our nation does not exist to serve the interests of the market. The market exists to serve our nation and our people." He criticized this concept of shareholder primacy, called for taxing stock buybacks, push paid family leave, expanded child tax credits, and openly advocated industrial policy to create dignified work. Even as recently as last year, in a 2025 interview, he was still defending the idea that capitalism must be channeled to benefit the common good. Now, listen, I get it. Pure shareholder capitalism without any regard for the social fabric can lead to hollowed out communities and to cultural decay. The answer is not to let Washington pick winners and losers. That is the road to serfdom that Friedrich Hayek warned us about, the great Austrian economist who escaped Nazi Europe and taught us that no central planner has the knowledge to direct the economy without destroying the spontaneous order that creates wealth and freedom.
We honor Professor Friedrich von Hayek for a lifetime of looking beyond the horizon. At a time when many saw socialism as ordained by history, he foresaw freedom's triumph. Over 40 years ago, Professor von Hayek wrote that the road to serfdom was not the road to the future or to the political and economic freedom of man. A Nobel laureate, he is widely credited as one of the most influential economic writers of our century. Professor von Hayek is revered by the free people of Central and Eastern Europe as a true visionary and recognized worldwide as a revolutionary in intellectual and political thought. How magnificent it must be for him to witness his ideas validated before the eyes of the world. We salute him.
Milton Friedman used to, thank you, George Bush. Milton Friedman used to say the business of business is to make a profit in a free market, and that profit motive serving consumers is the most democratic force in human history. Rubio is right. We do need strong families and strong communities. But the libertarian lesson from history is that when government tries to engineer the common good, it usually ends up serving the connected class instead. That's why we have to watch the policies, not just the speeches. So let's walk the timeline so you can see the full picture on this one. In 2016, during the primary, Marco Rubio called Donald Trump a con artist, a fraud, someone who would not make America great again. He was the young gun, the sort of establishment hopeful at the time. Then Trump won. Rubio swallowed his pride, endorsed him, and became one of the most loyal senators for the president. Now he's Secretary of State, executing the very America First agenda he once mocked. This is not unusual in politics, but it is rare to see it done this well. So working for Trump has forced Rubio to confront the real-world incentives that, of course, we've been talking about for decades. Globalism weakens nations. Open borders erode sovereignty. And a weak America invites chaos in the world. Rubio has seen the machine. He has been inside it. And he appears to have been chosen... He appears to have chosen the side of the working class Americans who built this country. But the past statements on capitalism remain. So the skepticism on Rubio is healthy It's not personal, it's principled. We've seen a lot of conservatives talk tough on the campaign trail and then grow the government once they're in power. So, and I put this exact question on X yesterday. I said that I used to dislike Marco Rubio. I still do not fully trust him after some of the comments he made against free market capitalism, but it doesn't seem like working for Trump. It has changed him. He was kind of heading towards Lindsey Graham status. Instead, he went base. And of course, when I posted this, the replies came fast and furious, including one from Milo Yiannopoulos, who called my whole take retarded, which I love because, this is the conversation we need to have, right? I've changed since I ran for president as a libertarian. I still believe in the Constitution, but I also see that Western civilization is under assault, and pure libertarianism without a strong nation state to defend it becomes a suicide pact. I started my career volunteering for Ron Paul. Ron Paul taught us to question forever wars in the Fed, but he also warned that without a moral culture and secure borders, liberty cannot survive. So when I see Rubio in Munich defending the civilization that gave us the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, I cheer. But when I remember his 2019 calls for government to channel markets, I pause. That's not being a hater. That is being a thinking American who has read the Federalist Papers and knows that concentrated power is the enemy of liberty. So here's the final synthesis on this. Marco Rubio, he's made a shrewd adaptation. He read the room. He aligned with the winning coalition. And now he's delivering a foreign policy that puts America and the West first. That is smart politics, and we should respect that competence. But adaptability is not the same as conversion. The second order effect is what matters. If common good capitalism means more industrial policy, more tax credits, more government picking favorites, then we risk slowing the very economic engine that funds our military, builds our families, and preserves our heritage. Wake up, America. The founders did not give us a perfect system. They gave us one that rewards virtue and hard work through free enterprise and limited government. That is the American exception. The reason that we became the beacon of the world, liberty. So let's admire Rubio's growth. Let's cheer this Munich moment, but keep your skepticism sharp. Judge them by the policies, not the speeches. Of course, the American Republic does not survive on personalities. It survives on principles. And the principles of liberty, limited government, and Western civilization are worth defending with both eyes open. That's the lesson of history, and that's why you listen to the Wake Up America show.
Here's Douglas MacArthur.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Wake up, America. I'm Austin Peterson. Today, we're stripping away the plastic veneer of the modern holiday calendar. They call it President's Day now, a catch-all bucket for everyone from Jefferson to the guys we cannot even remember. But officially, legally, and rightly, it is still George Washington's birthday, February 22nd, the day that the indispensable man entered the world. Now, amid today's bitter political discord where everyone is at each other's throats over reptilian bureaucracy, we need to look at General Washington. We're talking about a man who cultivated virtue like it was itself a crop, self-control, moderation, civility. He was not born a god. He chose to become the most admired presence in the 13 colonies. He created the army from ragtag discipline, and then he created the presidency by setting precedents that had to last. Wake up, America. We're celebrating today the architect of the Republic, not just a 3-day weekend at the used car lot. He's the reason we have a country to argue about in the first place. I have a personal history with the general's legacy that goes back to the 2016 Libertarian Convention. It was President's Day. In the hearts of every delegate there, or so I thought, I brought a replica of George Washington's flintlock pistol to that stage, a symbol of the revolutionary spirit and the right to bear arms that secured our freedom. I gifted it to Gary Johnson as a gesture of faith in our shared liberty, and he ended up chucking that pistol in the garbage. That pistol was in the trash. And it became a metaphor for the entire political class of the Libertarian Party at the time, or, from my critics, a metaphor for myself. They want the power of the office, of course, but they disdain the tools of the revolution. Gary Johnson wanted the title of president, but he rejected the virtue of the founder. Washington would have held that pistol with pride because he knew that liberty without the will to defend it is a temporary permission slip from a tyrant. Don't let the elites throw your heritage in the dumpster, America. We are reclaiming that pistol and that principle. Let's talk about the real Washington, not the marble statue or the revisionist caricature. Richard Brookhiser rescued the truth in his landmark book, Founding Father. While the woke academics try to write him off as just another dead, slave-holding white male, the reality is he was a man for the ages. Born a Virginia aristocrat, he could have lived a life of leisure, but he chose the battlefield and the cabinet room. He shaped untrained disciples into the force that defeated the British superpower. He didn't do it with focus groups, he did it with the content of his character. He was the only one who could hold the fractional factions of the new nation together, because everyone he knew he could not be bought and he could not be broken. He emphasized that America was a republic, not a monarchy. He rebuked those who tried to crown him king. Washington proved that the greatest power a leader has is the power he refuses to use. And that is the libertarian lesson that the modern swamp has completely forgotten. The most radical thing George Washington ever did was walk away. In 1783, after winning the American Revolution, he resigned his commission. King George III said if Washington did that, he would be the greatest man in the world. And he did it again after 2 terms as president. He quoted the Bible, Micah 4:4, asking only to sit under his own vine and his own fig tree, where none shall make him afraid. Brookhiser wrote that Washington's last service to his country was to stop serving. Think about that. In a world where politicians cling to power until they're clinically brain dead in the Senate chamber, Washington voluntarily gave it up. He rejected the exalted presidency. He rejected the permanent ruling class. He wanted to be a private citizen more than he wanted to be a potentate. Wake up, America. The vine and the fig tree are symbols of property rights and personal freedom, the very things that the modern bureaucracy tries to trample every single day. The general knew that government was a necessary evil, not a permanent career. Wake up, America. We have to address the skeptics who point to the paradox of slavery. Samuel Johnson asked why the loudest yelps for liberty came from drivers of Negroes. That is a hard question. But Washington was the only slaveholding founder to actually do something about it in his final hours. In 1799, Washington drew up a will directing that his slaves be freed after Martha's death. He provided for the elderly. He ensured the young men were educated and freed at 25. He singled out William Lee, his faithful body servant from the Revolutionary War, and granted him immediate freedom. He acknowledged their shared experience as veterans. He recognized the principle that all men are created equal in the most tangible way that he could. While others talked about it, Washington acted. He knew the nation could not stand on a foundation of coercion. He aligned his personal legacy with the eternal truths of the Declaration. Wake up, America. He was not a perfect man, but he was a man who recognized the moral arc of liberty and bent his estate to meet it. As we close this President's Day tribute, remember, Washington didn't leave memorable catchphrases. He left a nation. He left a blueprint for how to be a free people. He was first in war, first in peace, and he must remain first in the hearts of his countrymen. We do not need more lectures from elites in Oakland about tipping or bureaucrats in Iowa about our grocery lists. We need the self-control and the civility of the general. We need to stop throwing the pistol of liberty in the garbage and start defending our rights with the same grit that George Washington showed at Valley Forge. His life still has the power to inspire anyone who studies it, so give it a try. Read the real history, ignore the revisionists, and stand tall as a citizen of the republic that he bought with blood and preserved with virtue. Wake up, America. The general is watching, and we have a country to save. Stay tuned, because next we're going to look at Thomas Massie on the Wake Up America show. Many Thomas Massie fans saying they're done. He's gone too far. I'm a huge Thomas Massie fan. Can my next guest convince me off? We'll talk about that when we get back. Don't go away. You're watching the Wake Up America show, and this is the 4 Liberty Network. Imagine bringing George Washington back to life. Just to explain that, in 2025, men can get pregnant, waving an American flag might offend someone, and our government is $34 trillion in debt. But that's not all, George. We have drag queen story hour for toddlers. Pronouns are mandatory. And Harvard can't define woman. Oh. And we send billions to Ukraine but can't fix potholes in Ohio. You know, just normal modern empire stuff. I'm sure he'd be totally cool with it. Right after he finishes reloading. He didn't cross the Delaware for this nonsense, but you can carry on the fight with gear that would have made King George cry. Shop bold, shop free, shop4libertyshop.com. Picture this. It's 1776. Thomas Jefferson is hunched over his desk at Monticello, ink-stained fingers, writing the most radical document in human history. Do you really think he was sipping Starbucks? No. He was drinking something bold, something black, something brewed strong enough to fuel a revolution. That's the spirit behind founding flavors.
our signature line of liberty-fueled coffee. No soy froth, no climate guilt, no corporate slogans, just real coffee, inspired by the men who wrote freedom into existence. Every cup is a quiet protest. Against mediocrity, against tyranny, against bad coffee. So this morning, skip the globalist brew. Grab something worthy of a free man's sunrise. Founding Flavors. Now brewing at forlibertyshop.com. Legend has it, back in 1773, a band of angry, overtaxed patriots stormed a British ship, found the king's favorite tea, and said, "This would taste better without the tyranny." Then they tossed it overboard. Fast forward to today. That revolutionary spirit lives on in Boston Harbor Black, the boldest brew in the For Libert tea lineup. It's dark, it's smooth, it's unapologetically American, just like the folks who drink it. Whether you're sweetening it up on the front porch or drinking it straight like a Minuteman before battle, this isn't tea for royalty, it's tea for rebels. No fake flavors, no corporate slogans, just a cold glass of Don't Tread on Me in liquid form. So skip the woke iced tea aisle and stock up on Boston Harbor Black at forlibertyshop.com. Because when the heat's rising, the least you can...
Welcome back to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Here's the latest on the Epstein files. So Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act last year. President Trump signed it. The deadline came and went. The Justice Department under Pam Bondi has released millions of pages, but kept some heavy redactions. On February the 9th, Massie and California Democrat Ro Khanna got to see unredacted versions. They claimed to spot at least 6 men whose names were still blacked out. Men they said were highly likely to be incriminated. One was a high-ranking foreign official. Khanna read some of those names on the House floor. Massie threatened the nuclear option, said he would start reading names publicly if the DOJ did not comply. He even posted a video saying, quote, "I'm not suicidal, my breaks work, I eat healthy, I'm a good swimmer." Yesterday, he told reporters he's lost confidence in Attorney General Pam Bondi. But here's the backlash. Multiple outlets reported that at least 4 of the names that Khanna read had zero connection to Epstein. Apparently, they appeared in a photo lineup or unrelated documents. Some critics say Massie's chasing a dark fairy tale, risking innocent reputations and turning a legitimate transparency fight into political theater. One of the loudest critics, my next guest, joining us now, John Ziegler from California, very early in the morning. Thank you, John, for being with us.
It is a bit early, but this is an important subject, and I'm glad to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I saw your post. You said Thomas Massie was one of your favorite congressmen. Same here. You said that you're starting to question some of his motives. Same here. Help me to understand why you've felt this way and your thinking has changed on Massie.
Well, I'm a libertarian. I am one of the last true conservatives who's never given in to Donald Trump. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. I criticize him quite a bit, but I've actually defended him on this whole Epstein issue because I don't think there's any evidence that Donald Trump committed any crimes in this whole situation. And with regard to Massie, I've always liked his contrarian nature. I've liked the fact that he's the last true libertarian in Congress. He's not afraid to take, dangerous and unpopular positions at times, based usually seemingly on principle. But I think he's lost the plot here. I think he's jumped the shark, whatever cliche you want to use, because I think he has indeed bought in and become deeply invested in a dark fairy tale. Jeffrey Epstein, here's the essence of the story. This is, I think, the problem, Austin. People don't understand what the essence of the story was at the beginning. And that's why this relative molehill has become a massive mountain. This story was about Jeffrey Epstein hiring lots of prostitutes, some of whom were under the age of consent. That's what we know happened, okay? That's what he was pleading guilty to the first time. That's what he was charged with essentially the second time when he killed himself in a federal prison in 2019. To me, when he kills himself in the federal prison and there's these rumors that he might have been murdered, this is where the story starts to leave the gravitational pull of the rational earth, because conspiracies take hold and people presume, well, this is so fishy. He must have been murdered. And if he was murdered, there must have been a reason. And very powerful people must have been behind it to somehow get away with that in a federal prison. And then it spirals out of control for reasons that I'm happy to get into that are very consistent with a moral panic. And Thomas Massie has bought into the moral panic. And now innocent people are being hurt, and hurt dramatically. People, you mentioned the 4 people who had nothing to do with Epstein. There's a 5th person on that list of 6 that has been exonerated by the primary plaintiff's attorney in the Epstein case. And the 6th person resigned from their job because it's a state-owned company, and that the phrase in the Epstein files that went people went crazy about this torture video had nothing to do with Epstein. It was a publicly reported case from many years ago. And so it has no evidence whatsoever related to somehow being involved in Epstein's crimes. So they effectively went 0 for 6 after all this hype about give us this so-called list, a list that's never existed, because in my opinion, there never were any other co-conspirators or sex traffickers. There might have been some prostitute sharing, but there was never any massive child sex trafficking ring. And people have bought into this mythology. Massie has bought into this mythology. There's no evidence for it. There's no logic for it. There's plenty of reason not to believe it, just on basic logic. Like, for instance, Austin, there's so many basic logic points. If Epstein had massive blackmail information on incredibly powerful people, specifically Donald Trump, who was president of the United States in 2019. Why would he kill himself in 2019? You don't kill yourself if you have blackmail information on the president of the United States. It makes no damn sense. Why would the Biden DOJ do nothing about this for 4 years? They never said a word about it. If this was something that was real and scandalous and could especially cast aspersions on the president of the United States who was running for re-election, why are there no lawsuits related to this? There's no list from the survivors because they don't have any names to give without fear of being sued. If they did, they would have sued them themselves long ago. This story makes no sense. There's no fire there. It's all smoke and mirrors.
You called Massie a champion drama queen after his "I'm not suicidal" post. Why is he a drama queen? Why do you think he's behaving like this? Again, this is somebody that was your favorite congressman. Now you're saying that he's a drama queen. Do you think that he doesn't believe what he's saying, or do you think that he just got hornswoggled, or is he just trying to cover his ass for re-election?
It's a great question. I have thought a lot about this, Austin. As far as the drama queen situation, the saying "I'm not suicidal" business, makes it sound as if that he thinks he's taking such a dangerous position that someone might kill him, which is ridiculous. In my very, very strong opinion, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in federal prison. All the evidence suggests that. That's the key to understanding this case. The primary accuser in this case, Virginia Giuffre, killed herself last year just before her book came out. If someone was going to kill Virginia Giuffre, it would have been a decade or so earlier before she destroyed all sorts of lives with dubious stories. Nobody has been murdered in this case, and Thomas Massie's not going to be murdered. But I do think this goes to maybe his motivations. One of the most dangerous things I've seen in public life is when someone like a Thomas Massie falls in love with their own virtue. And I think he's fallen in love with his own virtue. And I think he has decided that this is his hill of virtue that he's going to die on. He got fired from MAGA by Donald Trump. He needs a good explanation for why he was fired from MAGA. This is it. This is his potential vehicle to surviving re-election without Donald Trump's support, because he can say, "I'm the man of principle. I stood up for the survivors when no one else did." I don't know that it's going to work politically. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I don't know. What I don't know, Austin, for sure is, does he really believe this, Or did he get duped and now he's invested in the fairy tale? It is far, far easier to dupe somebody than to convince them that they have been duped, especially when they're deeply invested in the fairy tale. And Thomas Massie is, in my opinion, deeply invested in the fairy tale.
Now, John, I live in libertarian world, and I'm so libertarian that they call me not a real libertarian on a regular basis, which is the litmus test these days. But I will say this. I've been a huge fan of Thomas Massie for years. I've met the congressman. I've donated to him. I've supported him in his cause, even against President Trump in the past. But my theory on what is happening, John, and you tell me if this rings true to you, is that Massie is on his back foot at the moment. He is under attack from every angle. He used to have President Trump on his side for a brief moment when the president endorsed him in his primary against the Democrat, and they seemed to be on the same side. Then there was this tussle over whether or not Massie would be named head of the Department of Agriculture, which ended up not happening. I think maybe Massie was a little miffed about that. And then he decided to wage open war against the president in a party where that is not allowed, is strongly discouraged, is the politest way to put it. And then now, in order to seek re-election successfully, he has to build a coalition out of people who oppose President Trump in the Republican Party, which, John, it's a vanishingly small group of people. However, I call them conspiratards, right? We're talking about people who they're conspiracy brained, but he traded the president. He traded the president's support. He traded MAGA support for conspiratard support. He traded support from people who actually win elections and who are relevant for the support of people who have Jewish derangement syndrome. Everything is a Zionist conspiracy. Groypers, right? People who hate the president because they say he's not fascist enough. Right? The kind of lunatics that don't really have any sway in the Republican Party, but they do have outsized sway online. And my concern is that Massie has done what Marjorie Taylor Greene has done and just jumped into bed with the lunatics, not because I think he agrees with them, because I think he's smarter than that, but I think that he sees this as sort of his last chance to hold on to power and to win re-election because he has no other constituencies other than the radical left, like Ro Khanna and others who, are conspiratards in their own way. They agree with every Nazi conspiracy as well because, of course, horseshoe theory brings Groypers and AOC types together, John. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a legitimate theory in your mind?
No, I like that theory. I kind of implied that with he needs an explanation for why he got fired from MAGA. I mean, we've all seen this, Austin. This happens in the media all the time. People get fired for other reasons, but they need a really good explanation for their firing, so they come up with I was standing on principle and I took a too dangerous position or too controversial position. I upset the wrong people and I'm actually in the right here and rallied to my cause. And politically, I honestly don't know if this is going to work. I've heard people say that it will work. I used to live in Kentucky, but I don't know his district all that well. Are Democrats going to rally around him? The record on that is not very good whenever a Republican has been ousted out of MAGA. I think you're right that the conspiratards are effectively his constituency. And I do wonder, Austin, is it possible that Massie has been duped by the amount of media attention and online attention that he has gotten that seems, I'm sure, in his bubble to be very, very positive for this story? Because let's face it, part of what's driving the Epstein hysteria and the Epstein moral panic is that at least online, there is a massive audience for this. Massive. Now, how does that translate into people that will vote in a Kentucky primary? I have absolutely no idea, but it could be a situation where it does not translate because a lot of these people aren't in that district in Kentucky. A lot of them maybe don't even vote. Who knows? A lot of them might even be bots because that's always a dangerous situation when it comes to being online and thinking that your position is very popular. So honestly, don't have a good sense of whether or not it's going to be politically viable for Massie. I just know on the facts and on the logic and on the principle, Thomas Massie, whether he realizes it or not, is wrong. And it's very disappointing because, as you've already said, he was my favorite congressman. And it's not a good sign that the last true libertarian in Congress is going around accusing people of crimes they did not commit based upon no evidence.
Yeah, it's deeply unserious. And I think it's honestly beneath him because I think he's much smarter than that. Now, let's talk about people who may not be as smart as Massie, but Pam Bondi. So do you think that she's looking for a fight with Massie, or do you? I mean, you know, my audience still loves Massie, and they're not big fans of Pam Bondi. So what's your take on the criticisms that Massie has made of Bondi?
Well, I'm not a huge Pam Bondi fan, but if you try to take a look at this from her perspective, she was put in a tough spot. Because you got to remember, it was Matt Gaetz that was supposedly going to be the attorney general, right? And Pam Bondi was not a national MAGA figure at this point. It is my strong opinion that to her, Jeffrey Epstein was not a big deal. It was not a massive bullet point on her radar. When she took the job, she's overwhelmed. And I think one of the key moments is, you're probably aware of this, she does this interview, this remote interview with Fox News Channel. And Fox News Channel asks her, have you seen the Epstein list? And she, in my very strong opinion, misunderstands the question because she's not an Epstein person. And she hears list and she thinks file. And she says, well, yeah, I've seen it. It's on my desk.
Right.
And people go, oh, my God, there really is an Epstein list and she has it. So why don't we see it? Well, she misspoke or misunderstood.
Yes.
Because she wasn't like Dan Bongino or Kash Patel, who were trying to become MAGA celebrities on the backs of this Epstein story. She wasn't well versed in it, in the conspiracy or in the reality. And I think what ends up happening is she then gets forced to devote an enormous amount of her tenure as attorney general to an issue she has no interest in, she has no knowledge of, and she finds out that this, in my opinion, much like Bongino and Patel did, she finds out that most of this conspiracy theory is total bull crap. And now what's she supposed to do? Because she's been promising to release the files. Trump doesn't really want to release the files. In my opinion, I actually think Donald Trump was more right about this story than anybody else. And that pains me to say it because I'm not a fan of Trump, but Trump understood what total garbage these files were going to contain. He knew Epstein. He knew Maxwell. He's been falsely accused of sexual abuse in the past with E. Jean Carroll. And I think he didn't want this to happen because he saw the moral panic occurring. And he was basically in an impossible situation.
Trump was right.
I agree with that. As bizarre as it is, in all seriousness, Austin, there is no public figure at his level that has been more right about the Epstein files than Donald Trump. And again, I'm not a Trump fan.
Okay. Conversely, I am a Donald Trump fan. John, honestly, this is a very awkward thing for me to talk about. You have to understand because I live in Massie world. I live in libertarian world. So I'm talking, this is firing inside the tent for me to even have this conversation. But I'm the type of libertarian who likes to entertain a thought before I assassinate it, right? So before I accept it, the question for me now is what do we do? Because here I am, I see Donald Trump, and personally, I'm not a fan of everything Donald Trump does, but personally, I think he's moving the country in the right direction. And my hope was here, John, that we would have a libertarian movement that could survive post-MAGA. I'm trying to build something that I think could allow liberty to survive post-MAGA, but I don't see that happening with our current crop of people who say that they believe what you and I believe right now, John. Massie seems to be destroying his career brick by brick. Rand Paul sort of absent from the stage to a large example. What's next for people like us who believe in individual liberty? I think I know what's next, and I'm trying to build something new. But what do you think is next, John? We can't just be cynical and black-pilled and allow our country to be run by morons. We can't let the conspirators take over, John. So what's next?
I'm with you. However, I live in Southern California, and I went through the COVID panic with Governor Gavin Newsom, and I saw that at least here, people don't give a rat's ass about personal freedom and liberty. I mean, because during the COVID panic, it was ridiculous. And unfortunately, California wasn't alone. By the way, Massie's state of Kentucky was horrendous because Andy Beshear, the governor there, was basically Newsom light. I mean, we had Pennsylvania, Michigan. There were several other states that personal liberty meant absolutely nothing, and there's been no recrimination, no accountability. We've just forgotten that even happened. I mean, to me, the COVID panic, especially since I have two young daughters who missed school for almost 2 years and basically had life stopped for almost 2 years for no reason, being forced to wear stupid masks, and our governors threatening to force them to take an untested vaccine to get back into school, which people have forgotten now. I mean, it was obvious to me then that libertarianism is dead as a philosophy in America, which is rather sad and ironic given the fact that this is the 250th anniversary of our founding.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, John. I think to some extent, I think libertarianism in the United States is dead. And I think there are a lot of vultures picking apart its corpse at the moment. I'm trying to revive this, John. I have put out a manifesto, a statement of my principles. I've been fairly successful at rallying people to my cause. I don't know how you feel about Vivek Ramaswamy, but he in particular inspired me to write my essay on what I call libertarian nationalism. And I think it's a reasonable way forward that actually adheres to the American tradition of liberty while still understanding that civilization is a team sport and that we can't be isolationists. We can't be even non-interventionists because other countries refuse to leave us alone, sadly and unfortunately. What do you think about Vivek Ramaswamy personally? I mean, not a fan, somewhere in between?
I understand why people have gravitated towards him. He's very articulate. Some of his current rhetoric or ideas, I think, are appealing. I don't buy it from a sincerity perspective. I refer to him as the fake Obama-Swamy because he has a lot of Obama's mannerisms, and the way he speaks is a lot like Barack Obama. His narrative is fake. A lot how he got his money is fake. His position, he pretended to be a contrarian on COVID. That was a lie. He is not a trustworthy person. I think he's a snake oil salesman. And I think, you should be warned about what you're going to get with Vivek Ramaswamy.
God, John, no offense, but I'll take that one.
Sorry, I'm just warning you. I am really good. I'm really good at picking out fraud.
Yeah, well,
and he's got fraud written all over him.
You're also living in Southern California, and it does warp your brain a little bit.
No, that's not it. Trust me. You can rationalize. Austin eventually going to come back to me and say, you know what, Ziegler, you were right about Vivek Ramaswamy.
I hope not, John. I hope you're wrong, because we don't really have a whole lot of hope here for people who really love liberty and believe in America as it was founded. Because right now, the bad guys are winning on all fronts. So if we just adopt a black pill attitude about this, if everybody's a faker, we don't give anybody a chance, there's no way to move forward. So I guess I should ask you, John, who do you like? Who do you think's moving forward? Who do you think's moving the country forward on the right for our ideas? Who do you like? Where do you see your white pill?
For me, one of the few, I shouldn't say the only, but one of the few prominent political figures that I still have respect for, and it's because of how he handled the COVID panic, is Ron DeSantis in Florida. I realize a lot of libertarians don't like him because he's very proactive about, his legislation and his conservative philosophy, and he does things that make libertarians upset. I get that. However, when it really mattered, the one man who stood up against a torrent of negative press that wanted to destroy him after initially, caving in and buying into the bogus COVID panic narrative, Ron DeSantis figured it out. And I truly believe, Austin, with every fiber of my being, that if Ron DeSantis had not had the courage to allow Florida to go back to normal and show the world that this could be done, that my kids might still be living in COVID in panic world today because there was nothing getting us out of this without Ron DeSantis proving that the whole thing was bogus.
Honestly, great opinion. And I love Ron DeSantis. I think Ron DeSantis's people are the ones who kind of, gave him a bad name in the last primary, but that's something we'll have to look at coming up next. John, you've been very generous with your time. It's very early, insanely early on the West Coast. I do want to give you a chance to plug anything that you'd like to plug, your own show, podcast, writing, Substack. This is your opportunity. Feel free to take it.
Yeah, I do a weekly podcast called The Death of Journalism, which is unlike any other podcast you've heard. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast, The Death of Journalism, and you can follow me on X. My handle is @ZigmanFreud, which is a terrible handle, but people seem to get a kick out of it.
Hey, I like it. Thanks, John, for being so generous with your time again. We appreciate you and have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
I'm Emily, and I brought Fuck Fascism Focaccia. Hi, I'm Christy, and I brought the Pizzagate Prison Confession Group.
I'm Megan, and I brought the He's in the Epstein Files Elotes.
I'm Laura, and I brought Donnie T's Tiny Hands Shrimp Cocktail.
I'm Nicole, and I brought the Christy Gnome Killed a Puppy Chow.
I'm Rachel, and I brought the Let Them Eat Cakes.
I'm Erica, and I'm on a work trip, so I'm missing the party. But I still brought Mutual Aid is Not Charity chocolate truffles, and these are the good ones from Chicago.
I'm Terry, and I brought the You Should Smile More veggie and cheese tray.
I'm Becca, and I brought the charcuterie board because fuck ice and serve fun.
I'm Kate, and I brought the midterms are coming milk chocolate pretzels and the look up your fucking primaries dates.
I'm Maura, and I brought hummus again.
Yeah, you could tell which ones ate the chocolate and which ones ate the hummus for sure. Most of them were eating the chocolates. You should smile more, babies. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We will have John Miltimore joining us live here in just a few minutes. I'm very excited to announce, got a big booking, big guest coming up tomorrow on the Wake Up America Show. You don't want to miss a single minute. If you're enjoying the Wake Up America Show, even when it sometimes does not confirm your biases, even if you're a huge Thomas Massie fan, we do allow criticism even of the people we like. It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it. And I do hope that Thomas Massie gets himself back on track. I hope that he stops palling around with the Democrats. I do think that much of what Massie is doing is making a big deal, mountains out of molehills, and essentially grandstanding in order to try and save his butt for re-election. And why do I say that? Because the president has sent all of the king's horses and all of the king's men to Kentucky to try and knock him out in that primary. And I don't want to see that happen. But I think that his own actions and behaviors right now are contributing to the reason of why that's happening. If you see your friend driving off of the cliff and, doing it with some kind of ridiculous behavior, would you tell your friend, please stop, please try and get back on track? Or, what would you do? Or would you not say anything to protect yourself and the wrath of his most rabid fans who are going to attack you, who are essentially your own potential supporters of people who might watch this show? Why would I bring that up? Well, it's because I actually do care about what happens to Massie. I want him to be fighting for us years from now. And many of his supporters will say, oh, Austin, he's safe with his primary. He's safe. No, he's not, dude. No, he's not. Nobody is safe in their primaries. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what any black-pilled, conspiratard, Groiper would say. I don't care what anybody would say. Any black pillar would say. Nobody is safe in their primaries. Nobody, anything bad can happen to him. And I think that this whole Epstein fiasco has been a massive, massive mistake. I don't think it's going to save his career. And I think that he should get back to the things that really make him strong and supportable. Things like the Prime Act.
Mutual Aid is Not Charity chocolate truffles, and these are the good ones from Chicago.
The good ones.
A little more homework. There are 6 men. We went in there for 2 hours. There's millions of files, right? And in a couple of hours, we found 6 men whose names have been redacted, who are implicated in the way that the files are presented.
Cringe. All right. So John Ziegler just gave his unfiltered take on why Massie has lost him as a fan. And he's not wrong to call out the drama. Last week, Massie and Ro Khanna got a look at those unredacted Epstein files. They spotted 6 redacted names they swore were incriminated. 1, a high-ranking foreign official, Khanna read some of those names on the House floor. Massie threatened to start reading some more. And then he dropped a "I'm not suicidal" tweet. But within days, multiple outlets confirmed at least 4 of these 6 had no connection to Epstein. They had showed up in photo lineups or unrelated documents. One was not even the Italian politician that they were thinking of. I mean, and this is not a defense of secrecy. Okay, this is a warning. When lawmakers start naming names from partially vetted documents, the risk is not just embarrassment. It's ruined lives and a public that stops believing anything. Nihilism creeps in. This is not the first time that we've seen the mob justice trap. History is full of moments like this, where good intentions met bad process and innocent people paid the price. So let's walk through a few so we never repeat them. Okay? Now, my screen is gone blank and I can't see. So Duke Lacrosse, perfect example. Central Park 5. Let's talk about what happened in 2006. Duke Lacrosse, 3 young men accused of rape by a stripper at a party. The media and the campus activists named them immediately. The group of 88 professors signed a letter essentially presuming guilt. National coverage called them thugs. The district attorney, Mike Nifong, ran on the case and hid expulcatory DNA evidence. The players' lives were destroyed before any trial. Then the case collapsed. Attorney General Roy Cooper called it a tragic rush to accuse. All charges dropped. The players were declared innocent, but the stain never fully washed off. Same story, 1989 with the Central Park 5. 5 teenagers, 14 to 16 years old, coerced confessions after hours of interrogation. Media and politicians, including a full-page ad calling for the death penalty, named them as monsters. They served between 5 and 13 years. Then in 2002, the real rapist, Matthias Reyes, confessed and DNA matched. The 5 were exonerated. The rush to judgment had already cost them their youth. These are not ancient tales. These are modern proofs that when we bypass due process for the sake of speed or outrage, we hurt the very justice that we claim to seek. Wake up, America. The founders lived through mob violence and kingly arbitrary power. They built courts, rules of evidence, presumption of innocence, and separation of powers for exactly this reason. James Madison warned that factions and passions could destroy the republic if not checked by institutions. Ron Paul spent decades reminding us that government power without restraint becomes tyranny no matter who holds it. The Epstein files must be fully released. The victims deserve truth. The powerful must face accountability, but not through congressional theater or unvetted name drops. That path leads to more redactions next time, more dismissals of legitimate questions, and more innocent names dragged through the mud. The second order effect is a public that stops trusting any transparency effort. We can demand full disclosure and still insist on vetting, on evidence, on due process, because the alternative is not justice. It's the next Duke. It's the next Central Park 5. Principles over personalities. Rule of law over rush to judgment. That is the American way. That is what separates us from the mob, and that's why we stay skeptical. Joining us next, John Miltimore to discuss that and more, plus a bag of chips. It's the Wake Up America show, and you're watching the 4 Liberty Network.
When the Founding Fathers dreamed of liberty, they forgot one thing: coffee. Introducing Founding Flavors Coffee, the brew that built America, and the brew that's fueling a new revolution, one kitchen at a time. Small batch roasted, Patriot approved, and disappearing faster than a red coat at Yorktown. Don't get left behind, soldier. Real patriots are starting their mornings with Founding Flavors. And trust us, freedom tastes better with a fresh cup in your hand. Stop drinking those tyrant brews who take your money and don't support your values. Stocks are limited, demand is booming, and your morning deserves a taste of liberty. Order now at 4libertyshop.com before the next shipment gets signed, sealed, and sold out. Founding Flavors Coffee, the official brew of morning rebellions everywhere. Get yours at 4libertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Glad and thankful to have you here. All right, so we had a critic on today, and I'm a big fan of Thomas Massie. We talked to Mr. Ziegler here just a few minutes ago, and he says that Massie was his favorite congressman. Now he's not his favorite congressman anymore because of this whole Epstein fiasco. But I want to make sure that I'm being reasonable, that I've not just kind of like had the blinders on because I'm a big Trump fan. Ziegler was not a Trump fan. By the way, my next guest, I would say, is more of a Trump moderate. You might say praises him when he does good, criticizes him when he does bad. A true libertarian. It wouldn't be Monday if we didn't have a Miltimore. Do we have a Miltimore, guys? Staff, team? I mean, just me in a shoe closet. Actually, it's just me streaming live from the mud room. How you doing, John?
Hey, happy Monday to you. It's a glorious day.
It is a glorious day, and we've got a lot to discuss here today. I just kind of want to talk about Thomas Massie for a couple of minutes,
sure,
because I think intellectual honesty is important. John, I don't like criticizing Thomas Massie. I think he's done a fantastic job up until this point, but I kind of think that maybe he's gotten up a little bit too caught up with the Epstein file stuff, and maybe he needs to get focused back on things like the Prime Act or some real libertarian legislation. Do you worry that Massie and picking this huge war with the president and jumping into the Epstein files thing, that this has kind of, I don't know, diminished him or his chances for electability? What's your take on this whole story?
I don't think it's diminished his electability, but I do think, we're getting a little carried away with the Epstein obsession. I think Massie is, his survival instincts have kicked in. And he's I would say Trump has picked a war with Massie more than Massie has picked a war with Trump. And Massie is using this. I think there is a personal element to this. He's fighting back. There is something there. The deeper you go in this Epstein stuff, you realize why it was covered up for all these years. You have very powerful people on every side of the political aisle in there. It's a lot of people have reputation that is going to be damaged by this. So that's why it's been covered up for years. That's why it's all redacted. It's turned into basically a carnival now. Nobody really knows what to believe, and it's a big mess. I would like to see they're going to be rolling this out for years. I think you do need prudent people that kind of relax a little bit on, every name in this. I think there are people that are named in this file that they didn't visit Epstein Island. They didn't do all these things. Like there's a guilt of association in this that we have to be careful about. That said, you see guys like Howard Lutnick that he did go to the island,
But Thomas Massie, his name is in the files. So
there you go.
So, because that's how ridiculous it is. I mean, he and Ro Khanna went into the archives to look at the unredacted versions. They said they found 6 men. Turns out there was people completely unrelated. One was an auto mechanic, and it was because they had spent 2 hours looking at millions of pages worth of files and then jumped out ahead of a story. It feels like I don't know. I'm just truly disappointed because strategically, it just seems as if this whole war with Donald Trump has not been good for us. Where in the beginning we had Doge and we're putting together a team of people who were trying to downsize government, trying to advance the ideals. Vivek Ramaswamy quit Doge, ended up running for governor of Ohio, turned out to be a smart move. But politically and strategically, people who share the beliefs that you and I held have never been more radioactive, John. It's never been worse. The cause of liberty has never been more of a scavenged corpse, in the United States at least, than it has in my entire life, in my history, John. You and I were about the same age. It's devastating where we're at.
No, it's disappointing. And I think the reason for this is tribal politics. Politics is trumping everything. People will positions they once held, they argue that, themselves out of those positions now because it's not politically expedient. It's difficult and it is a mess. You'd like to see people get along more. Part of this is, I got to say, part of this is Trump's nature, though. Like as soon as someone gets out of line, he comes and smacks them down and makes an example out of them. And he did that. He spent a lot of money, pushing, I don't want to say he personally, trying to drive Massie out of that seat. I think Massie is now in fighting back mode. But yeah, I don't think this really benefits anyone. And it's like I said, it's become a carnival right now. Like everybody trying to smear each other with, your name's in the Epstein file. You did this. And they're going to do that because it's a radioactive thing. It's like this big nuclear waste pile. If you're anywhere close to it, it could destroy you. And that's how it's being used today. And you're right. There's big problems in this country, right? We know there's big problems. We have Social Security, which is going to be insolvent in 6 years. Okay. And insolvent, that means everyone's going to take a 25% shave immediately if nothing's done. Do you think these people in Washington can solve that? Do you think they can come up with a solution? I don't see it happening.
I think I agree. It's just quite disappointing. It's just disappointing because there really was, in my lifetime, there really was a strong, surging libertarian movement that was valuable, valued, and did useful things. And now it just doesn't feel like that much anymore, John. But let's talk about what you're doing over at AIER, American Institute for Economic Research, this morning. Let's talk about things that are going to actually impact people's lives here, because the Epstein thing has become more and more a sideshow, a carnival sideshow with clowns. And everybody's a clown, unfortunately. We don't have any ring bearers or anything useful. John, talk to us a little bit about your piece that you're writing here over at, is this an AIER piece?
This actually published at the Washington Examiner. And it takes a look at FDR and Trump and through the lens of housing policy. It's interesting, you have FDR and Trump, and I've long seen a kind of a similarity between them. They're both New York guys. They're both patrician class, very, wealthy men that both spoke very effectively to the working class. They both had this populist streak. And I think Republicans bristle at this FDR comparison. They don't like it. But you know who doesn't mind it? Trump. Like, he really doesn't. And he's called FDR amazing. He recently was photographed in front of FDR's portrait in the White House with Mamdani. And there are some interesting similarities here. And FDR was the one that said it's every American's right to own a decent home, right? Like that was sort of, he was the first president to come out, and it kind of got the federal government involved in this idea that the federal government should be supplying housing in some way for people. Trump weighed in on this issue recently, and he took kind of a different, he said, everybody's talking about lowering housing prices. He said, I want housing prices to go up. And he was mocked over this. Like the people said, like, what is he thinking? We're in an affordability crisis. Why is he trying to make housing more expensive? But there is a method to the madness here. Like most Americans own homes. Most Americans have equity in their homes. And most Americans benefit when the housing, market gets more expensive. And homeowners are aware of this. And I think Trump was talking to them when he was saying that. Of course, a lot of people disagree that affordable housing is something Washington should be doing. We should be working on making housing affordable. And I think that's right. But I think that the right answer is we don't need Washington involved in the housing market at all. And that is what I think people need to understand. We don't want a president trying to drive up housing prices. We don't want a president trying to say, no, we're going to make housing. That's not the job of the president. And it's really not the job of Washington. These are local matters. States are going to regulate these things. Now, a lot of states regulate them badly, and a lot of local governments do that too. But the market should determine homeowner prices. But I think that whole vision is lost. I think the 20th century progressivism kind of shattered that view, and now Americans, you can talk to conservatives and they think, yes, we should be directing housing markets and prices in this way. If the president didn't do that, what if it collapsed? And I think I'm in the minority view today in America, even though I think it's insane that we have Washington D.C. involved to the extent they are in housing markets.
There's a lot of talk about what makes up a third world view, John. And it's interesting we have this conversation about what makes third world. What's a third world view? A third world. A lot of it, is online conversation, but it's starting to bleed out over into the real world. Don't you think that some of these views that people have with, whether it's industrial policy or any kind of like centralization of control over the means of production or central planning, that really is a third world view, isn't it, John? I mean, central planning and totalitarianism and authoritarianism when regards to economic matters, that is the model of the third world, is it not?
It is, and I tend to agree with you. Steve Ratner just wrote a piece on this, and he said he visited China, and he said we're falling behind. He said we need to start, central planning. I forget the term he used, but basically it's state capitalism. I think was what he's talking about essentially. I can't remember if Ratner used that term, but he said we have to start doing what China is. But somebody made a good point. We're never talking about launching a 1,000 coal plants like China is, right? They're selective in how they do this. But yes, I think the more you centralize, the closer you are to a third world. And I think a lot of economists understand that. A lot don't. A lot just they look at the power. You can go back to the 1920s and 30s. Everybody thought the USSR was the future, right? And you had economists up until the 1980s that were saying, "Oh my gosh, the Soviet Union's leaving us in the dust." And today it's the same with China. Like you have a lot of a segment of economists that want us to marshal the power of Washington and plan markets like they tried in the 20th century. It's going to end the same way. Right, that is going to happen. Unfortunately, though, we're closer to the Chinese system today than we are a laissez-faire system.
Yeah, it's true, and it's sad to see. But people are always trying to say, when it comes to the people who are for the third world, they say that look at China; it shows that communism has worked. But then we have to have a discussion about what China did in the 1990s, John. And at that point, you're arguing with morons. So, is there any point here, John? I mean, like, how long do people like yourself and myself stand up on top of the cliffs alone with our 10 commandments of economy while people aren't listening? And not only are they not listening, we're not even speaking the same language, John.
I hear you. Like it's sort of like, to me, like reminiscent of the biblical prophet Isaiah, who had to just shout, like no, this is going to happen if you don't listen. But guess what? Isaiah couldn't turn the tide either. That didn't mean he shouldn't try. I'll say this. Like for me, I've accepted our power to influence these things is minimal. Doesn't mean we can't influence things, but we can't, dictate all these things. We can only say what's right and wrong. We can advise, but our ability to control things is limited. And we should, as individuals, I think you have to accept that to a degree. But I think that's why holding good principles is all the more important. If we don't, what we're going to end up with is sort of this French Revolution where you have the Robespierre out in front. He'll get the mob, behind him and lead you down a path you don't want to go. We know the principles, that work. We know that free markets work, even if the average American voter doesn't always understand that. We need to keep preaching that. But no, but you're not gonna convince everyone, and I'm convinced we kind of are on. We've both read the Road to Serfdom, Austin, and I think we tend to go down that path. Not just America, but all countries. There's this pattern. You forget the old things that worked, and you forget how that prosperity arrived, and then you tend to start to get, to think that redistributing wealth is good and fair. Are we on that path? Probably, but we fought back before.
Marco Rubio gave a speech in Munich last week, and he talked about, to these European progressives, it was the Munich Security Conference. He says, in the United States, we have no interest in being polite and orderly custodians of the controlled decline of the West. How do you react to that?
It's interesting. No, I think I would disagree. Is it in decline? Yes. I do see people trying to manage that decline. But you got to, I guess, here's my question to you. What do you think is the West, Austin? How do you associate that idea?
At this point now, I think it's different than it used to be. I don't really I think that mass immigration has destroyed Europe to a large degree. I don't even see many European countries as really fitting an idea of the West. I think that probably 90% of the West you could classify as just the United States to some degree. I don't even know if Canada. I think Canada is creeping authoritarianism, and it's soft fascism, it's soft tyranny under the guise of niceness has destroyed what were once strong Western liberal traditions. So I think the West probably is made up of the United States, Israel, Argentina, maybe those three nations, probably the closest that there is to something of Western liberalism as you and I understand it. So that's what I would probably define as the West.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair description. I was watching Paul Kingsnorth. He gave a speech a year and a half ago at the First Things conference, the Erasmus, lecture, and I had never thought of it this way, but he basically said traditionally it was understood as Christendom for the most part, but Christendom, those ideas infused with the Greco-Roman, philosophy. But Kingsnorth would agree with Rubio that it's pretty much dead. The West as we knew it is kind of a relic. So Rubio talking about managing the decline of that, I think is important, but we got to look back at those ideas that did bring about this civilization that achieved these things. And even, people that agree that the West is good, they disagree on a lot of these things. I think limited government is a key part of that. Yeah, I know a lot of people today that celebrate the West.
Then the West is dead.
Yeah, no, I mean, it feels that way. But I think, to me, this idea of limited government is a key component of that. I don't hear a lot of people, either Republicans or Democrats, that really talk about limited government anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a shame. John, I appreciate you joining us here every Monday. You've been such a friend of our show that we've named a segment after you, Mondays with Miltimore. I want to give you an opportunity before you go to plug anything you'd like to plug or share before we take off.
Yeah. First, it's a pleasure always joining you on Monday, even when we get testy with each other, Austin. That's perfectly fine. You can find my content at The Take by John Miltimore.
The Take by John Miltimore.
On Substack. The Take. Yeah, on Substack. Substack's great. It's an outlet where I can write about economics, but also, culture in movies and things like that. By the way, this is not a plug. I can't wait to watch the new HBO A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, because I read all those short stories by George R.R. Martin. They're fantastic, and I heard the series is phenomenal.
Okay, I won't spoil it for you. I started watching it. I'm halfway through, but I'll look forward to hearing.
Oh, you did? All right.
Look forward to hearing your take on the Take.
You'll get to read it there.
Have a good one, John.
Hey, see you, AP.
Bye. It's time to talk a little bit about food for just a couple of minutes. So I binge ate over the weekend with Valentine's Day. I drank a half a bottle of wine. I was eating all kinds of, I ate a waffle and I was, pizza. I had a frozen pizza, half a frozen pizza, and all kinds of nasty junk I ate this weekend, in regards to my diet, right? And, I've been dieting for about a month and a half now, and I've tried diets before with some success. Last year, I used a Fitbit to drop some weight. This year, I'm just I'm going on some instincts and what I've learned about diets in the past, and also using AI to help me to structure my diets. But what I asked the AI to help me build a diet around was helping me to stay feeling full and to actually provide me with enough energy to get through the activities that I have for a day. So you probably know I'm a karate sensei and I work out a lot. So I wanted to lose fat without losing muscle. I still want to be able to build muscle when I go to the gym workout. So I asked AI or ChatGPT to put me together a diet that would help me to accomplish my goals. It knows that how long I work during the day. It knows that I have 3 workouts a week and they're very high intensity. And it knows that I'm working very, very early in the morning until very, very late and at night to build the For Liberty Network. But when I had been eating so well, so healthy for about a month and a half, and then this weekend, I had fast food and frozen pizza and all this stuff that I hadn't eaten for a while, I actually noticed something that I hadn't felt in quite some time, which is that I felt more hungry, even though I had eaten these large quantities of these processed foods. After I had, and then drank alcohol, I actually felt more hungry, even though I had eaten more food. But on my normal days, on my normal diet, when I eat what I've put together to help me, what AI has recommended to maintain energy, not feel hungry, so I'm not thinking about food all day, I actually feel more full. I feel satisfied. So I think there probably is something to this concept of empty calories and processed foods versus unprocessed foods. Just something that I'm learning for myself right now, and I'm sharing with you, and I invite your feedback. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Maybe tomorrow on the Wake Up America show, you'll tell me. Thank you so much for everybody who made financial contributions. We didn't push real hard to unlock bonus content today, and that's fine. No problem. We'll do it tomorrow. I appreciate everybody like Quest Fanning and Barney Styles and Drew Van Ruckle and others who are helping. Grizz Cheese, Bruiser65, Wyo Wildman. I really loved your idea about the radioactive communist zombie. I think we could do a cartoon. We're expanding as quickly as we can here, but I have a plan to expand the For Liberty Network even more. So something like that in the future, I think that's a great idea for a project, but we got to finish the Battle of Athens documentary first. I'm fundraising for the final stage of that for editing. I got to raise about $8,000 for that to finish her up, and we'll get it. We're getting there. And thanks to people like you who have been so generous with us financially, we'll get there. And we'll start producing new projects like that. Brad, write that idea down. Radioactive communist zombie Culturama cartoon. What do you say? All that and more. Thanks so much, Team Ill22, Relaxing McGoy, Quest Fanning, for all of your generous support of the Wake Up America show. Because of you, we're building the For Liberty Network. Have a good one.